This is Rob Tebbutt for Boxing Social. Delighted to be joined here today by Shane McGuigan. We're at Wasserman Head Office in West London after the announcement of George Groves' retirement from boxing. Shane, first and foremost, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Bob. I'm really, I'm just winding you up. I'm good, thanks, mate. It's a bittersweet for me. Obviously, being involved in George's career for the last 3 years, it's been great, but it's his decision, and I think it's always a mutual decision as well between the two of us. It's getting out at the right time in a world title fight, for the Ring Magazine #1 belt. You can't say you didn't get out at the top, and done so much in his career, achieved so much, been written off so many times, overcome so many things, and just sort of privileged to be a part of it, and excited for his next step in the boxing world, because I know he's got aspirations of going into sort of management and mentoring fighters, and being involved in that myself. It's a tough business. It's an energy consuming business, but it's extremely rewarding. So I feel like he's got so much to give and so much for these sort of young people coming through, that it's only the start of his next chapter, really. And he's sort of finished that fighting chapter, and with all the things that he set out to do, lots of money in the bank, world title around his waist, and being involved in huge box office fights, and that's what he's done.
And we'll come on to kind of George's career, and obviously particularly your career of working with George. But start kind of at the end, really. When did retirement become when was it first mentioned? Was it in the immediate aftermath of the Callum Smith fight? Had it been mentioned previously, or was it something that kind of was sprung on you?
No, it wasn't sprung on me. I was in the hospital after he dislocated his shoulder against Eubank, and he went, "That's me done now." And I was a little bit shocked, because we just come off the best win of his, not the best win of his career, but one of the best wins of his career. But he knows, he'd been around David Hay whenever David was trying to reconstruct his shoulder and come back from it, and it was such a long process, and it took David 3 years to do it, but it took us 9 months or whatever it was, of extremely hard work to get the shoulder firing. Big thanks to Ben Carraway and Kevin Lidlow, who did all the work on that. But that from my sort of side, I thought, okay, well, we'd always said, like, let's win the tournament and then come out on a high, because the money in the tournament was so good that anything after that, we knew that there was going to be the Ring Magazine on the end of it, and doing it, Andre Ward or Joe Kawasaki always seemed the right thing to do, is retiring when you're coming off at the top level, and obviously a win. But it didn't work out for him against Callum Smith. But I think this is the perfect time to do it, because anything after this, then you're fighting for all the wrong reasons. You're fighting to get yourself back, and Father Time is key. I'm not saying that he could beat James DeGale and Chris Eubank, but he's already beaten them. There's not any fight out there really that gets him motivated, and I think being in the camp for the Callum Smith fight, there was definitely a lack of motivation. Albie, his little boy, was born, and it's just he's been a professional for 10 years. That's a long time to be a pro, and he's been boxing since he was, like 9 or 11 or whatever it was in Del Youth. But before that, he was kickboxing since 7. So he's been in this business a long time, and it gets tiring. Doing the runs, making the weight, dieting. When you're comfortable in life, you have to have like real needle and want to be able to get up in the morning to go and do that. And I think, that bit between the teeth, once it goes, and fighters are the first people to know it, but normally they're the last people to admit it to themselves. And George is an extremely level-headed person, and just thought, no, this is the right thing to do, and told me 3 days after well, we went for dinner, me and his wife Sophie, and yeah, we discussed it straight away, and I thought it's the right thing to do, and yeah, not once has he changed his mind. You know, we've gone out on a few runs since. He'll still be coming in the gym. He trained yesterday. You know, it's just new role and new career for him, and you know, for me, it's the first fighter that I've had in my stable that's retired. Obviously, David left me before he retired, and you know, it's kind of, it's a weird. This is the first sort of cycle. I mean, you got other trainers out there that have been training for, you know, like Jimmy Tibbs, for instance, however many years, 30 years or whatever, 30, 40 years. So for me, I've been in the game 9 years, and as a coach, and it's the first time someone's retired with me. So it's a strange sort of feeling, but it's also, it's a nice feeling, because you know that they're not putting themselves on the line anymore, and it's tough business, as I mentioned before, but there's just so much more to life than boxing. It's entertaining for the fans and for the people, and that's what they want to continue to have. But there'll be the next breed coming through. There'll be the next generations that people, you know, latch onto, and you know, a fighter can go on 2 or 3 fights too long, and they're in it for all the wrong reasons, and then they get hurt, and that's not what I want to see happen to one of my fighters.
You mentioned the Callum Smith fight. You mentioned kind of that lack of motivation. How soon did you realise that, and how difficult was that camp coming off the back? I mean, the old saying of once a fighter starts talking about retirement, he's already retired. So after the Eubank fight, was there any element of you in the build-up to the Callum Smith fight that potentially thought, okay, this potentially is not going to go our way?
No, there was not. I still had full faith that he could win the fight. His sparring didn't go to plan. You know, it just, his left shoulder wasn't firing, and we sparred twice a week against lower opposition, and then once he started up in the sparring, there wasn't enough sting in that jab. You know, now it would have had more power in it, but just the fact that we were rushing it, and then it was only really 2 weeks of quality sparring, but you know, you look at it from an ability and experience level. You know, you've got his experience with getting through that fight, and you know, Callum Smith fought a very good fight, but he also, like, I knew that he was a harder fight than Chris Eubank. You know, so you're coming off it, a great win with less confidence in your shoulder, and you're in against a better fighter. So it's not from a coach's standpoint. It's a tough one to take, but you know, I still had full confidence that George was going to do the job and come away with the victory. But I knew our chances were it was a lot more of an even. You know, myself and George looked at each other in the dressing room before Eubank, and we just nodded. Everyone around us was bloody, you know, super nervous, thinking, "Oof," you know. And we just nodded, and we had that same sort of confidence. Just thought, you're going to absolutely walk this fight. You're going to chin him and knock him out. He obviously didn't knock him out, but it was a very comfortable fight. So, you know, but going into the Callum Smith one, there was an air of, you know, underconfidence, definitely.
Talk to me about the first time you either spoke or come across George. Obviously, I know that you weren't working together at the time, but when did you first encounter George in both of your careers?
Well, we'd met a few times as amateurs. Yeah, obviously he was a 75 kilo, and he was you know, in Dale, so I never went over to Dale to spar, but you know, I'd met him a few times at sort of tournaments, and I'd always really admired him. I'd always thought he was a brilliant puncher, like great fighter, and he would really blend the style into being a good pro. And then Carl boxed in Huddersfield on the undercard of can't remember who boxed. I think it might have been a Gary Sykes fight or something like that. It was like a Saturday night fight night, and George was on the undercard as well. So we sort of met again then, and then I brought Carl over to spar Brett Beeden in Adam Booth's gym once again we started chatting again. But Adam was training him, and it was very much just just sort of getting to know each other and just sort of chatting. But before the first FROCH fight, I got a phone call from Adam Booth. Well, actually, Dad got a phone call from Adam Booth and said, I still manage George Groves, and I'd like Shane McGuigan to train him. Can you write up a proposal? As a manager, taking that to the board, you have to be seen to be looking for a boxer's best interest. But I genuinely think that Adam wanted me to train him, and George he was going to the biggest fight of his life. They'd had their dispute, and they decided to part ways. And I was pretty relatively unknown at the time, but it would have been great to have been able to work with him at that stage as well, because I feel like But then again, he could have had an underpar performance and straight away just binned me. So things happen for a reason. But I was approached by Adam. I sort of got in contact, and 1 or 2 days later, George sort of had made his decision to go with Paddy because he was previously in the camp. So it was comfort sort of thing. And then I got approached after the Badou Jack fight. He did an interview with Sky Sports, and they said, "What about Robert McCracken? What about going to Abel Sanchez and stuff?" And he said, there's also Shane McGuigan that's on the sort of on the list. And the way he said it, I thought I'm definitely going to get a phone call. And it took longer than I was expected. I was expecting, because I thought it's a sensible move to kind of come across. We both live in London, but he did a little bit of work with Robert McCracken, and that didn't work. They didn't gel, and then sort of rang me up, and took it from there. We had that must have been November. I was already working with David Hay at the time, so that must have been October, November. And then we boxed. His first fight was at the 28th of January 2016. So that was the start of the journey, and then it went from there to there. We fought De Luisa, then he fought Brophy, then he fought Martin Murray, that first acid test, and did boxed the ears off. Murray hurt him a lot of times, and that's when the confidence went up. Then the sad night against Goodneck, and then he was in the camp for the whole of Frampton versus Santa Cruz 2. We went out to Vegas. He sparred Caleb Plant. I put a little picture of them up the other day. And then got the Chudnov fight. Won against Chudnov, Jamie Cox, Eubank, big victory, and then the Callum Smith one. So we had a lot of fights in that short, and a lot of big fights in that short time frame. But it feels like we've been working together and we've been mates for a very long time, and coming away from it, it's just so happy for him. He's made loads of money, and also just achieved his goal. That's it. It's something that he wouldn't have been able to sleep at night if he hadn't have won that world title, because there was thoughts of him packing it in after Badou Jack. He just thought, do I want to have to reinvent myself and go to another trainer and try and push against it? I've already done that, after the FROCH fights. Now I lost against Badou Jack, and it's just the courage of him, and that sort of determination that he holds is just, it's unbelievable. And it's taught me a lot working with a fighter like that, and it's also just helped out all the boys in the gym, boys and girls in the gym. Just making them aware that you can't. Once you have a little setback, you've got to get back up and go again and improve yourself. And it's always about willing to improve yourself. And really, when it stops, when that level of going, okay, can I be bothered to go and do a technical session for an hour? Do I want to get much better? Or the arrogance in a lot of fighters going, I'm the best in the world. Once that goes, boxing's a bad place, because it's the most humbling experience, getting dropped or knocked out in front of people, and then the fans slating you. It's just you know, once it's good, it's amazing. You feel on top of the world. But when it's bad, it's like it's a dark place, and you have to have the right support and family around you. And George has always had that. He's always picked himself up and rebuilt himself. And I think just after the Callum Smith fight, he thought, just don't want to do it. Don't want to do it again. And credit to that decision. It was the correct decision.
What do you feel that you've learned from George Grove? You're both very similar ages. Forgive me for saying it, but from knowing you, you're both two people who do things their own way, as George has done throughout his career and you do in yours. What have you learnt from him working with George, both as a fighter and as a person?
I've learnt a lot. You know, I think we're both, I wouldn't say like disappointed in boxing, but I think we both understand that we've both had highs and we've both had lows, and we've both had people that we're really close to upset us and do dishonourable things. And I think you just, you know, I think you sort of help each other out and think like we really instilled a lot of faith in the sport, and we did that together. It's a business that is a cutthroat business. It's, you know, you're doing a deal there, and then suddenly around the corner you're doing another deal, and it's, you know, from George is a guy that's not something that sits well on him, and you know, because he's a good person, and like working with someone like George that's massively taught me that there's good in this sport. There really is, and you just have to keep people at arm's length. And you know, I let George into my personal life, and yeah, and he's a friend for life. He really is, and there's only a few sort of boxers that I will let into my life in that sense, because I'm quite a private person, but that's something that George is as well. So, you know, we keep our circles real small, and I think, you know, it's just that level of like, you know, just that level of desire that he has. That's something that I've learned a lot from George. You know, like learning to just, you're on your journey. You know, don't let anyone deter you from your journey, from your path. And there's so many negatives out there that you've just got to keep sticking to it and keep working towards something that you set out to do. Because as soon as you start working towards something that, you know, if someone tries to warp that decision and you're doing it, you know, you've got to stick on your path, and you've got to make sure that, you know, you want to, for instance, and my point is I want to train as many world champions as I can before I get to 40 years of age. That would be my retirement day. But you know, that's the key, and that's something that I'm going to work diligently towards, and that's something that George did. You know, in his career, he wanted to become world champion, and he put every ounce of his determination and ability in towards doing that, and he overcame it.
With that being said, if in 6 months down the line George comes to you and he says, "I want to fight again," what do you say?
I'll say I would advise him against it, because once you've thought about doing, you know, once you've thought about giving something up once, it's that decision. You've made that decision in your brain. My dad said it. My dad had a chat with him about it. You know, Dad said like 6 months before he retired, he didn't want it no more. You know, he'd lost his father. You know, his brother was in a bad place, and you know, he'd moved to England. There was so many changes, and he just was like, I don't want to do this business no more. And I think once that's even crossed the mind, you know, you have to be honest with yourself. But I wouldn't let George fight if he was completely 100% adamant towards it. I wouldn't let him box and not be in his corner. I would be there. That's the thing. You know, even if he came back and, you know, ended up becoming a bloody journeyman, it would never happen. But you know, even if that was the decision and path that he made, you know, I'd stand by it. So the thing is, I would advise him against it. But I think, I know George. I know he's not coming back. You know, he's happy at the decision, and he's made the right decision. And you know, we had a couple of goals, and we had a couple of things that sort of we ticked off, and you know, that's the thing. You can keep making new goals all the time, but then you're forever unsatisfied. It's just, you achieve the biggest goal that you set out to do, win a world title, and then the next one, financially secure yourself. Done both of them. So anything apart from that is doing it for the fame and glory of the sport, and he's had that. He can, he's not the sort of person that walks down the street with his head up trying to look across to see if anyone notices him. He wears a hat, he tries to make himself, incognito in disguise. And so that's why I know that once he's made that decision, he's don't get me wrong, I know on fight night he has a buzz that all fighters do, but he doesn't go chasing fame.
How much of, not impact because that's the wrong word, how much did the Edward Goodneck fight affect George throughout his career? Was it something that he's had to completely distance himself from as he's continued his boxing career? And if so, how do you feel that he'll kind of react to that now he has hung up the gloves?
I think it's hard to comment. It was just a weird sort of tale of events. We had Nick Blackwell in the gym before the Martin Murray fight, and then he obviously had that Eubank thing, and then the Goodneck thing happened, and it was all very close together, and two people that George had been sharing the ring with in quick succession had sort of had those life-threatening injuries, and then you had his little son being born, but it didn't take away the killer instinct in him, and that's a terrible phrase to use, but it didn't take away that ruthlessness of him. It made him aware of the repercussions of boxing, maybe a little bit more. But I think, is it a combination of that, or is it a combination of him becoming a dad? He never was soft, but he never became soft. I've just seen this kid fall off the high chair there as we were talking. He's never was soft, but it's just maybe just started to realise the repercussions of it. And once you have a young family, I think the same thing as I said before. Once you achieve your goals and your dreams, and then you financially secure yourself, it makes those things more apparent. And I think at the time of the Goodneck fight, he hadn't done that, he hadn't won the world title, and he hadn't financially secured himself as much as he wanted to. But once he'd done that, I think it was like, now it's just setting in a little bit. And I'd love to do some more charity work. George would as well, for Eddie Goodneck and his family. Got a few ideas that we're sort of stringing together, and it's a real sad turn of events, but it's boxing. It was boxing. You had just a few around that time as well, which was just made it real apparent.
With George retiring, where does this leave the landscape at 168 pounds?
Heavily in Callum Smith's favour. He beats Eubank and DeGale. He beats Ramirez, in my opinion. Beats Calum Plant, because I've seen Calum Plant up close. I think, someone like a Golovkin coming up has the ability of beating him, but how long in the tooth is he? How many hard fights is he? He's already started to slow down, so it leaves him in a very strong position, but it also leaves him it's a weird one. It's kind of, because he hasn't had the exposure in that tournament, he came away from not having a big fight until the final, and it was televised in Saudi Arabia. So although he made a hell of a lot of money, he didn't get the exposure that he deserved. With the Eubank fight, it was in England. The press got straight on it. They loved it. They loved the story. You had Eubank Senior involved. You had two big personalities in George and Eubank. Eubank was calling me a PE teacher. I had a Hall of Famer and my dad that was involved as well. It was like did a lot of sales, and then next thing you know, you were out in Saudi Arabia, and it's sort of it's bombed on TV. No one really saw it. He didn't get the traction. He came away with a Ring Magazine #1 belt. But the money that was generated in that tournament is hard to replicate again, especially if you don't have the exposure, i.e. Anthony Joshua, someone that's fighting on pay-per-view and extremely relevant. And Callum Smith is he's a sort of guy that humble, just quiet, doesn't say anything, doesn't go out and do a Carl Froch, what Carl Froch done yesterday, doesn't say stuff against the grain. He sort of just lets his boxing do the talking. But in that, it's just you're in a hefty market with a lot of big fighters out there that are like the Joshuas, the Dylan Whites. These are pay-per-view guys that are loud, not so much loud Joshua, but they're big brands. So you have to sort of make yourself appealing to the audience that are going to be tuning in, and something that he hasn't really done. So it's going to be, does he go to the States, try and unify against? I think where I see Callum Smith going will be to America, trying to make a name for himself out there, picking belts up, and then the UK will jump back on him and sort of really get behind him. But it might be a Kawasaki-esque sort of career where he doesn't get recognised really until the end of the career. But I hope for his sake. He's a nice guy. I spoke to him, his family and stuff. I hope that he gets recognised as the #1 in the division, because he is.
Now, I wasn't going to bring it up, but seeing as you've already brought it up, the Carl Froch comments yesterday. Don't know whether or not I'm going to ask George about it, but I'll ask you about it as soon as you mentioned it. What did you make of those?
I didn't see them until today, because Lee McGregor and was staying at my house last night, and they're in camp. So they said, "Oh, you see Froch's comments," and then I sort of looked on and saw, but I think Andre Ward summed it up with the you're 40 years of, you're over 40, you won. So, what are you bitter about? I think he says stuff that he doesn't really think about, and then next thing you know, he's defending himself. I was never involved in the Froch fight, so George has a lot of needle with him, and obviously that's something that they've got between each other, and it's just sad. Like Frampton boxed Santa Cruz in Vegas, and Froch was out there working for Sky Sports, and he could have easily come up and just said, like, George was approachable, George was there, and the issue is with Froch because of the way George made him feel. He made him feel intellectually inferior, and that's his chip on his own shoulder. He needs to get rid of that. Because he's coming across all wrong, and that's the same thing. I just think he says things and he doesn't understand what he's saying, and then next thing you know, he's defending himself because he's a proud person, and he's looking silly, and it's really immature and pathetic.
I know you said George would never ever come back, but Froch Groves 3 at light heavyweight. Do you think that would bring him back?
Cruiserweight. I mean, Froch just kept himself in shape, but there's no way he's making 12 stone again. But nah, it's been put to bed. It's like the Eubank versus Nigel Benn. But you saw them hugging and sort of both emotional, passionate people. Especially Nigel Benn. They once they got to 45, 50 or whatever, they let it go, and they'll still constantly argue and natter at each other, but most of the time it's sort of they're on okay terms, and I don't ever think they'll get to that, to be honest. I just think I remember being in a Hall of Fame with my dad in 2005, and we were out playing the golf tournament, and there was marvellous Marvin Hagler that was like in the team behind us, and then there was like Sugar Ray Leonard that was like the other halfway across the golf course, and like they had a couple of altercations, and I was thinking, you're just like, what was that fight, 85, 86 maybe? You're at the time it was 30 years on, 20 years on, and it just that's terrible maths by the way, 20 years on, and yeah, I remember thinking to myself, God, like that is so unnecessary, but like they had Needle, and I think maybe George and FROCH will always be that way.
Okay, well, just before I let you go, quite open, vague question. Hopefully you can give it a bit of clarity. How do you think George Groves would be remembered by British boxing fans?
Never given up. Yeah, I think he's got to go down as one of the best super middleweights that Britain's produced, and just he'll be remembered for dropping FROCH, and for humbling Eubank and becoming a world champion, and that's why there's a lot of fighters that don't get that credit, and that achieve the same things as what George has achieved, but they don't get that credit, and like as his mate and as his trainer, it's great that he can walk away with those memories and also be recognised as one of the best fighters that's in the 168 pounds that Britain's produced, and there's been a hell of a lot. There's been Kazaki, FROCH, there's been DeGale, Eubank Senior, or Ben and Collins and everything. We've always been Watson as well. There's always been some brilliant fighters in that sort of division that Britain's produced, and I think he's up there with all of them. So on his day, he could mix it with every single one.
Okay, well, Shane McGuigan, thanks very much for speaking to Boxing Social. Really enjoyed that, and I will speak to you soon. Thanks very much.
In or not, Bob Headbutt. I mean, it's been such a good interview, but I think I might have to just lower the tone and get my immaturity side out. So I just drew a little caricature of Bob Headbutt. Gosh, signed and sealed by myself. I'll sell it.
Yeah.
Some analysis.
Shane McGuigan's 30 years old. It's just probably worth dropping that in there before the end of the interview. Thanks very much for speaking to Boxing Social. Catch up with you soon.
Cheers, Rob. Thank you very much as always.